mind, take a second and stop what you're doing. We are going to look at a frequency polygon example because those are a little bit more tricky. As long as you remember a couple things about frequency polygons, it's not too bad. So a frequency polygon, remember I told you, it's kind of like a line graph, except we're doing it for continuous data. So we did it for like the Old Faithful example. And in order to have something to put on the x-axis, you had to use the midpoints. So when I'm looking at this, these numbers are the class midpoints. Now, also on a frequency polygon, it always has to connect back to the x-axis. So that means the first and last points are made up and set to a frequency of 0 just so it connects. Okay? So if I asked you this one, what is the class width? That's how far from one class to the next. What would that be? 10. How far from the beginning of one class to the beginning of the next? So it's a total of 10 if you subtract those. How many classes are represented? So the first and last aren't real. We don't count those. So then I have 1, 2, 3. Is that okay? All right. What is the midpoint of the last class? Remember, these are the midpoints. So the last real midpoint we had the upper and lower limits of the first class. So the first class, the midpoint is 45. That means this class started here and ended here. What's halfway in between 35 and 45? 40. So my lower limit is 40. That's where the class started. The upper limit. Okay, if we think about the next one starts at 50. This one has to end before that. 49. Depending on the data, if it had decimals, you might have to go, like I think yours is talking about hours of something, so you could say, in that case, you might say 49.9 if it could be decimals. All right, the upper and lower limits of the class with the highest frequency. So my highest frequency has a midpoint of 85. So what would be the lower limit of that class? I took this out of the book, but that's 75. So the lower limit, this started at 80. And the upper, okay, halfway in between is 90, but we know this one has to stop before the next one begins. So the next one begins at 90. So this one stops at 89, or if we had decimals at 89.9. Does that help with the question number 6?